you talked about like beefing up the sounds because you can't always, like you said, like when you're recording, it sounds kind of flat. So you mentioned one way. You said you used the, I think it was Ultra Maximizer. Do you have other? Do you have other ways?
Yeah, I mean that was I mean, Ultra Maximizer is a bit corny, but certainly I'd say I tend to use some analog preamp emulations. So, for example, it might be the Red 17 preamp from Waves. I like using that a lot just to add some kind of very natural distortion, especially in the bottom end of the RPM where things can sound a bit flat. So I use that a lot. I use Isotope Trash a lot because of the multi-band distortion again. Again, very, very subtle, but it's just trying to kind of warm things up again. You've got to find other ways to compensate for the fact that your speakers are not going to play this stuff back at this proper volume. So by enhancing it, using subtle harmonic distortions and that sort of thing, just to warm up the sound can really, really help, especially if you're then playing things back through those awful Logitech speakers or whatever, you know. But very much trial and error, you know. What works for me might be completely wrong for somebody else, you know. And obviously, you know, you can't go out and buy every single plugin that there is just to try things out, you know. But certainly, you know, I do like turning preamps up too much to get some of that kind of, like, I know it's fake, but analog warmth. Back in the old days. Companies like EA and that, where I used to work, they would use, there was a particular solid state recorder called a FR2 by Fostex, and they had very, very good sounding preamps that sounded good when they were overloaded. And at one point, I think EA were buying up as many of these discontinued FR2s as they could just for the preamps, and then kind of bastardizing them into their sound devices and whatever, but just because the preamps worked better for car recordings.
Right. Makes sense. Cool. So we talked about like the plugins, and you also mentioned before too that sometimes you just need to layer other engine sounds or other sounds with it.
Yes.
So do you have a process for doing that, or is there like a certain sounds that you go to, or is it just like you have one engine sound, you put another one on top and it works? Like how do you go about that?
To be really honest with you, I've not done that since I was working back at Codemasters, because Codemasters had the technology to be able to do that, which I don't have anymore. But yes, if you were able to record a load of different vehicles, different engine configurations, V6s, V8s, V10s, whatever, and then you had tools which would then analyze them and save them out in their own format, then obviously that tool, you'd probably be able to then say, right, I want to mix these two together and listen to, you know, to the results of mixing those things together. So that's really more down to the tech that you've got allowing you to work as a sound designer. There isn't anything that I'm aware of off the shelf that would allow you to do the same sort of thing. So that's basically a case of, you know, striking up a good relationship with your audio programmer, plus, you know, the producer who's going to sign off on the budget, and spending some time doing some R&D to see what you can come up with.
Makes sense. So would you say that most of your, I don't know, designing or whatever would be inside of the game engine if you're doing something like layering like this? Or even if you're doing plugins, would it be in the side of the game engine, or would you test it out in your DAW or whatever software before?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on again, it really depends on how your tools are, but I would imagine that a lot of the stuff is done outside of the game. I mean, you know, we're going back to sort of like PS2, PS3, maybe PS4, but I think even with PS4 and Xbone, you're not necessarily going to have the kind of clock cycles available for audio to do all that sort of thing on the fly. So I would imagine a lot of it is done externally. I mean, if you can do it all externally and save it all out as generic WAVs or generic loops, and obviously you can use WIs or Fmod to then mix things together. But it's having that tech in the first place, I'd say. Which that's the you know, for me it's kind of disappointing not to have that tech anymore, but you know, that's the way things go.
Right, of course, you work with what you have, right?
Exactly. You know, at the moment I'm working with a company and we're not recording at all, you know, because up until recently there's not necessarily been the budget to do that sort of thing. But then we're looking at, okay, you know, to the future, how can we get some budget? But we're actually starting to think about moving away from using recordings and maybe starting to get more into procedural audio for this stuff, just because of the nature of the game, you know.